Welcome to Octane Vein. I've been looking forward to saying this for such a long time. In this episode, I start the engine swap on the E21 track car to fit a 3-litre straight 6 from this E46, taking it from 80 brake horsepower to 220 brake horsepower. I'll cover every step on this YouTube channel so you can follow the entire process. I'll tell you what parts I need to use, what needs to be carried over from the donor car, what needs to be fabricated from scratch, and what I can use from other BMW models which will make the swap easier. At the end of that process, I'll end up with a track car that has the same power to weight ratio as legends such as the E46 M3, the Lotus Carlton, and the original road-going Audi Quattro. But this car doesn't have any of the driver aids that those cars have, such as power steering, ABS, or even traction control. This thing is already a raw driving machine, but nearly tripling its power is going to turn it into a serious track weapon. If you've never seen my channel before, I'll give you a very quick overview. I'm an engineer working for an automotive company in the UK, and I love driving and modifying cars. I've previously fitted a 5.7 litre Chevy V8 to my Supra drift car, and I did that entirely on my driveway.
The E21 is a 316 from 1983, so it's one of the latest E21s. I've owned it since 2015. I've taken it to the Nürburgring once after owning it for only 3 months, which is about the amount of time it took to fix most of its reliability problems. It was stripped out when I bought it with a couple of cheap bucket seats in it. Since then, I've fabricated a full 6-point MSA spec weld-in roll cage from scratch, which means I bought the straight tube and used the bender from Garage Sinister, where I used to work, to form the tube, which I then notched and welded in place. I really went to town on this cage. One of the guides on YouTube on building a cage for a time attack car states that the tolerance on your cage should be 1/2 inch, which is 12.7mm. Mine is less than 5mm. It's a proper work of art, and I'm really proud of it. The E21 is currently on the original engine, which is a 4-cylinder M10, and although it's badged a 316, it's actually a 1.8 litre engine with a carburettor. This car had already been upgraded to a twin Weber carburettor when I bought it, and I've had it on the rolling road, and it produces 80 brake horsepower. The M54 has, or at least had, 227 brake horsepower when it left the factory in 2001, which is almost triple. This engine is going to absolutely transform this car.
Now, I'm not the first person to fit an M54 into an E21, so I am aware of some of the challenges that I'm going to face already. The first one being the exhaust headers are not going to fit around the steering column, and they probably won't even fit inside the chassis rail either. The gearbox mount is not going to fit onto the E21 chassis, so that will need modifying or completely fabricating from scratch. The other thing is the brake booster on the E21 sits right at the front of the engine bay on a long extension bar, basically because it was never planned. When the E21 was designed and built, it was for the German market, so it was left-hand drive. When they converted it to right-hand drive, there was no space for that brake booster on the firewall, so it was moved forwards. It may be in the way when the M54 engine is in the engine bay. And then there's all the ECU and all the wiring that goes with that doesn't have a proper home, so that will all need packaging as well. I'm also going to upgrade the drivetrain so it will handle the extra torque from the 3-litre engine. I'm going to use the subframe, the trailing arms, the half shaft and the diff from an E28, which is the 5 series from the same era. Now that will give me 5 stud hubs on the back, which will match the front because I've already upgraded the front end to E36 hubs, which are also 5 stud. At the same time as doing that, I upgraded the front brakes to E36 discs and calipers, so I've now got enough stopping power for when the new engine is in. You can see all the work that went into that upgrade, including all the CAD modelling, the FEA simulation, and the fabrication work that I did to get those parts to fit in episode 1. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now I do know that the E28 rear subframe will foul with the E21 fuel tanks, so I am going to have to modify one or both of those parts in order to get them to fit. The M54 engine does have problems of its own. The main one that I need to fix is the oil pump nut, which can come undone during high revving applications such as in a track car. Now that will lead to a fatal loss of oil pressure, causing the engine to seize, so I definitely need to fix that. But that will be much easier to do when the engine is out of the car. I also need to take the sump off anyway because I need to swap it for one from an E34 so that it clears the subframe in the E21. I've already done a compression test on the engine and you can check that out in the previous episode. I'll put a link below. For a high mileage engine, the results were actually pretty decent, with the pressures being between 165 and 180. Now that is a little bit lower than I would have hoped for, but they're within 10% of each other, which is all you can really ask for on an older engine. Plus, it runs really smooth and it sounds amazing. So I'm really happy with this engine and I cannot wait to get it in the E21. The next job for me to do is to take the ECU out of the E46 and send it off to have the immobilizer coded out so that it runs properly when it's in the E21. But before I can do that, I need to disconnect the battery. Whilst the ECU is away, I'm going to remove the cam cover from the engine and have a look at the cams and the cam galley to see if there's any sludge. Now this part of the engine can tell you a lot about its previous maintenance and how regularly the oil has been changed. So let's take a look. Now this could have been a lot worse than it actually is, considering the age and the mileage of this engine. I was quietly hoping that it would be in good condition though, because the previous owner had told me that he'd looked after this car and done regular oil changes on it before it was taken off the road in 2018. And that is evident from the condition. It's not perfect though, there is some sludge around the Vanos unit and inside the cam cover. So I will give this engine a flush using Liquimoly oil engine flush. In order to do that, I have to get the engine back up to temperature and run it for 12 minutes. So I need to refit the cam cover. I'll leave the old seal on there because it's actually in quite good condition. Usually on an engine of this age, that seal has completely turned to plastic, but this one is still quite soft, so that shows that it's been replaced. That also backs up what the previous owner told me about the Vanos units being done, because you would have to take the cam cover off in order to do the work on the Vanos units. So I'm pretty happy that he was telling me the truth with that, and I don't have to open these Vanos units. So I'll give the cam cover a quick clean and wait for the ECU to come back. So the ECU is back, and I have to say I am so impressed with Ender at End Tuning in Birmingham. He turned this round in 2 days. They were so helpful on the phone when I spoke to them before I sent it, and he explained all the different options that there were available for the reprogramming of the ECU. Now, I've only gone for the basic reprogramming, so that is just to take out the immobilizer and the other sensors and signals, but he does offer tuning options, so slight power upgrades and other things like that, which he explained to me, which I might consider in the future. So, the big test, now I want to put it back in the E46 and just check that it still runs as it should before I take the engine out and put it into the E21. And that means if I have any problems when it's in the E21, then troubleshooting will be a lot easier because I know it's nothing to do with the ECU. I'll show you the footage of that in a second, but before I do, I just want to ask everyone who's watching to please subscribe to the channel. Now, I appreciate that everybody asks this nowadays. This is the first of many episodes on this engine swap, and I'm only going to ask this once. I really want to grow this channel and for Octane Vane to become something, and if you're subscribed, then you're going to help me build it. Plus, if you've got this far through this episode, then you're interested in what I'm doing, and you'll want to see what happens next. So if you're subscribed, then you'll get notified of when that next episode is available. So really, everyone's a winner. So if you could just press that button, then I really appreciate it. Right, enough on that subject. Let's get back to the fitting of the ECU.
Famously, assembly is the reverse of disassembly. The connectors are poker yoke, which means they're all different, so you can't get them in the wrong position. Just ensure every connector is fully clicked in place and the security clip is fully home.
Okay, so that's a relief. It all seems to be working properly and there's no warning lights on the dashboard. So that means that the ECU reprogramming seems to have gone really well. So the next job is to jack the car up, warm the engine up, and then do the oil flush.
The engine flush is performed on the old oil, however a fresh oil filter is fitted first with a small amount of oil being added to the filter housing. The engine is warmed up to temperature, the Liqui-Moly engine flush added, and the engine is restarted and left to idle for 12 minutes. The oil is then drained, the filter changed again, and fresh oil added to the engine, which is then left to idle for a further 12 minutes. This dilutes any traces of the flushing fluid, which contains chemicals which can damage seals if they are left exposed to it for too long.
So now the car is in the air, I can get underneath it and have a look at what state the chassis is in. Now, I can see from jacking it up, half of it's already fallen on the floor, so I'm not going to hold my breath. And to be honest, it doesn't matter. I bought this car for the engine and assumed that the chassis was pretty rotten. But unfortunately, there are quite a few engine oil leaks in the engine bay, so I'm just wondering whether there's going to be more oil leaks or more rust. The underneath of the E46. Start with this exhaust, that AC Schnitzer tailpipe. That clamp's long come undone. Back box isn't massively rusty actually, although that weld isn't very nice. And then the diff, and the diff cradle, pretty rusty, as are all the casings for the bushings on anti-roll bar and that rear subframe. Moving forwards, this exhaust is pretty ropey. Oh wow, look at that. So that's been extensively repaired. Let's leave it like that. Could say some other things about that. This jacking point, which is common on all old Beamers, but that rust, it goes all the way along the sill. So yeah, that's not great. And then this brace underneath the exhaust. The rear one is a lot worse than the front one, actually. More repairs on the exhaust. This section, actually not that bad. Although whether I'll be able to use, I don't know, those flanges, look at the state of them. No, they're not usable. And then, this is the gearbox mount. So let's just measure. So the distance between those holes is roughly 370 mil. And then, what's that, 105-ish? We can compare that to the E21, but I guarantee that is not going to fit. And then coming forwards, oh yeah, there's these flanges. In the front of the car. Oh wow. Okay, so there's a sponge to catch all the oil. It's the first time I've seen that. But yes, there's a fair amount of oil under here. And rust. And then this radiator, not sure it should be exposed like that. That doesn't look right. Looks like it's bowed. Anyway, I'm not going to be reusing that, but yeah, that is in. That's only suitable for the scrapyard. So it was a pretty close thing. I think the fact that the sponge was under there means that I will sway towards there was more oil than more rust. But yeah, I wouldn't want to have to try and put this car back on the road. It would need a lot of welding. So that does mean I don't feel too guilty about breaking it. So that's good. So that literally means there's only one more thing to do. And that is, of course, cue the time lapse. In the next episode, I'll take a look at all the parts I had to take off the E46 donor car in order to get the engine to run properly in the E21. And after that, I'll be taking a closer look at the M54 engine itself. Spoiler alert, it's not good news, and I think I'm learning the hard way that a cheap 330 Ci doesn't necessarily mean a cheap M54. So thanks for watching, and until next time, take care and look after each other.